सांसों में तू ख्वाबों में तू
Chapter 2, Perfect Match. Taeyoung sat at the dining table, her gaze drifting toward the young man sitting across from her. Something about him felt familiar. Who is he? She wondered silently. I've seen him before. Is he Cookie? Across the table, Jungkook also noticed the way she looked at him. It made him slightly uneasy. Why was she looking at me like that? He thought. Jin gently placed another dish beside Taehyung. She smiled warmly and asked, Tae, tell me, how is it? Taehyung tasted the food and nodded with satisfaction. Delicious, as usual. Jungkook's brows twitched slightly. As usual? He thought in confusion. Beside them, Namjin chuckled. Jin, serve her more. Taehyung glanced around the table and asked casually, Where's Uncle Jhope? And Aunt Jisoo and Jonah? Namjoon answered easily. Ah, they went on a short trip. Jungkook paused in the middle of eating. Why does she talk like she knows everyone already? He wondered silently. Suddenly, Jin clapped her hands lightly, as if remembering something important. Oh, I forgot to introduce you two, she said brightly. Tae, this is our son, Jungkook. Taehyung nodded politely. Hello. Jungkook responded simply. Hi. Jin continued with a cheerful smile. Jungkook, she's Bogum's only daughter. Jungkook gave a small nod. Taehyung blinked once, slightly puzzled. What's with that dry response, she thought. The table slowly returned to silence as dinner continued. Then suddenly, Namjoon straightened in his chair, his eyes lighting up with sudden excitement. Tae, he exclaimed. When you were born, we visited the hospital. I even held you in my arms. Taehyung looked up in surprise. You never told me that. Namjoon grinned. I'm telling you now, right? Taehyung smiled softly. Yup. Namjoon laughed. You were tiny. Wait, I still have the album. He quickly wiped his hands and hurried away. Jungkook watched his father disappear down the hallway, looking mildly confused. A few moments later, Namjoon returned with an old photo album in his hands. Excitedly, he flipped through the pages. Look, he said, pointing to one photo. This one, your dad took it. Me, Jin, and you in my arms. Taehyung leaned closer and carefully took the album. That's me, she said gently. And this is Uncle Jhope, Aunt Jisoo, that's Jonah. Then suddenly she paused. Her finger rested on the image of a small boy standing in the corner of the photograph. Cookie? Jin laughed softly. Ah, he doesn't like being called that anymore. Taehyung looked curious. Why? We used to call him that all the time. Namjoon coughed lightly and subtly pointed toward his son, because now he says he's mature. Taehyung turned toward Jungkook with an amused expression. Oh, got it. Jungkook quickly looked away and pretended to drink water. But despite himself, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. After a moment, he pushed his chair back. I'm heading to my room, he said. Good night, Mom. Dad. Namjoon looked up. Jungkook turned halfway. Good night. Good night. For a brief second, Jungkook's eyes flicked toward her. Just a small nod. Then he turned and walked away. Taehyung watched him leave before looking back at Jin and Namjoon. The two exchanged an awkward smile, and politely, Taehyung returned the same smile. Night continues at the Jeon mansion. Inside Taehyung's room, soft moonlight slipped through the curtains, drawing pale silver lines across the bed and floor. Kim Taehyung lay on her stomach, her elbows resting on the mattress. Between her fingers, she held a small photograph, carefully, almost delicately, as if it were something fragile. Her eyes remained fixed on the smiling face in the picture. After a moment, she whispered softly, Mom, I miss you. You should have been here. Her thumb slowly brushed across the image, as though warmth could travel through paper. The room fell silent again. Then slowly, Taehyung rolled onto her back and pushed herself into a sitting position. She reached toward the bedside table and placed the photograph inside a tiny frame waiting there. Carefully, she adjusted it, straightening it until it looked perfect. It was a small ritual, something she had done countless times before. Her gaze lingered on the picture. Quietly, she murmured to herself, Why do I remember the things I don't want to think about more than the things I want to keep? I just want to forget some thoughts. Is that even possible? A small breath escaped her lips. And if it is, how? Frustration flickered across her face as she pushed a strand of hair away from her eyes. Then she dropped back onto the bed with a soft thump. Gradually, her thoughts slowed. The weight of exhaustion wrapped around her mind. And little by little, her eyes closed. Sleep finally claimed her. Meanwhile, across the hallway, Jungkook's room looked very different. The only light inside came from the glow of a laptop screen. Jungkook sat at his desk, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes moving steadily across spreadsheets and emails. His fingers moved with mechanical efficiency. Reply. Schedule. Again and again, he worked without pause, until suddenly, a thought slipped into his mind. His hands stopped. Leaning back in his chair, Jungkook frowned slightly. She knows my family. How? His gaze slowly drifted toward the dark window beside him. How come I don't know her? He muttered quietly. I don't even remember her father. His brows knit together. Did I forget something? A pause followed. Are my childhood memories really that blurry? He exhaled sharply, then shook his head as if scolding himself. Focus. Pulling the laptop closer again, Jungkook forced his eyes back onto the screen. Morning arrived gently at the Jeon mansion. In the kitchen, Jin stood near the counter preparing breakfast. The scent of warm food filled the air as she flipped something in a pan, humming softly to herself. The peaceful moment didn't last long. Behind her, soft footsteps crept closer. Taeyoung tiptoed into the kitchen, a mischievous grin forming on her face. Then suddenly, Wog! Jin jumped. Ah, Tae, you scared me! She clutched her chest dramatically for a second. Then she burst into laughter. Taehyung smiled sheepishly. Aunt, I was thinking of looking around the place, she said casually. Is it okay if I go out? Jin waved her hand dismissively. Of course. Why are you asking permission? Taehyung smiled and reached for an apple from the fruit basket. Taking a casual bite, she leaned against the counter comfortably. From the corner of her eye, Jin observed her quietly. In her mind, a thought formed. Her mood changed completely, a full 180 since she came here. A small smile touched her lips. That's good. A few minutes later, breakfast was finished. Empty plates rested on the table as Taehyung wiped her hands and stood up. Namjin glanced up at her. You're going alone? Taehyung nodded. Yes, Jonah and I used to wander around here all the time, remember? Jin laughed softly. Of course, you two wouldn't sit still for even a second. Namjoon pointed a finger at her with mock seriousness. Fine, but come back home on time. Taehyung straightened dramatically and gave him a playful salute. Roger that, uncle. With a light grin, she grabbed her phone and headed toward the door. A moment later, she slipped outside. The house grew quiet again. Jin slowly exhaled. We should have asked Jungkook to go with her. Namjoon didn't even look up. He wouldn't. A brief pause followed. Definitely not after what we did. Jin sighed softly. Yeah, I know. Outside street. Cars passed. Traffic lights blinked between red and green. People hurried along sidewalks, lost in their own destinations. Among them walked Kim Taehyung. She moved casually along the footpath, dressed in simple clothes, a sky blue oversized shirt, loose jeans, and clean white shoes. Comfortable. Exactly the way she liked it. Her eyes drifted toward the traffic signal ahead. 17, 16, still red. Without thinking much about it, she hurried across the road before the light could change. And then, thud! She slammed straight into someone. Both of them stumbled from the impact, spinning slightly before barely catching their balance. Taehyung immediately lifted her hands apologetically. Sorry, I wasn't. But the girl she had collided with spoke at the exact same time. I'm sorry, I was in a hurry. Both of them froze. Taehyung's eyes slowly dropped downward, and that's when she saw it. A scoop of ice cream, sliding off the cone, melting, right across the girl's dress. The girl looked down as well. Her eyes widened in horror as she stared at the stain spreading across the fabric. Quickly, she tried wiping it away with her hands, but that only smeared the melted ice cream further. Taehyung's expression filled with guilt. Oh no, I didn't see you, she said quickly. I ruined your dress. The girl shook her head immediately. It's okay, really. But Taehyung refused to accept that. No, it's not okay, she insisted gently. Come on, there's a convenience store nearby. Let's get some tissues. The girl paused for a second. Then suddenly she smiled. All right, and together, they crossed the street toward the small convenience store on the corner. The awkward tension between them slowly melted away, replaced by quiet laughter. Inside, convenience store. A few minutes later, both of them were sitting at the small counter inside the store. The girl carefully dabbed tissues against her dress, trying to remove the sticky ice cream stain. I really should have been watching the road, she said again. The girl looked up and smiled reassuringly. Hey, it's okay. But Taehyung shook her head. No, it's my fault. I'm not used to these roads. The girl tilted her head curiously. New here? For studies? Taehyung shook her head lightly. I already graduated. The girl blinked in surprise. Oh, whoops. Then she suddenly brightened. By the way, I'm Park Jimin. She extended her hand with an energetic smile. Taehyung reached out and shook it. I'm Kim Taehyung. Jimin's eyes sparkled mischievously. Let's grab something to eat. Taehyung hesitated slightly. But Before she could finish, Jimin suddenly grabbed her hand with excitement, her eyes shining. Please. She grinned widely. I just loved your behavior. Kind people are so rare nowadays. Thank God I met a new friend today. Taehyung blinked. New friend? Jimin nodded enthusiastically. Yep, from now on. She winked playfully. Let's get to know each other. Taehyung chuckled softly at the girl's sudden enthusiasm. Sure, she said warmly. No problem. The two of them grabbed snacks from the shelves and returned to the counter, but the conversation didn't stop. Stories, jokes, random thoughts, everything flowed easily between them, as if they had known each other for years. Eventually, their spontaneous adventure continued. They walked to a nearby theater, bought tickets, and ended up watching a comedy movie together. Sometimes, the best friendships begin with something as simple as an accident on a busy street. The theater doors slid open, releasing a small crowd into the evening air. Among them were Taehyung and Jimin. Still giggling, Jimin stretched her arms dramatically toward the sky as they stepped onto the pavement. "I didn't know our choices matched this much," she laughed, turning toward Taehyung with playful excitement. "Perfect match, huh?" She winked. Taehyung smiled lightly. "Maybe." Jimin suddenly stopped walking. She turned toward Taehyung with exaggerated seriousness. "Hey, not maybe. Definitely." Then she pulled out her phone. "Let's share our contacts." And just like that, the day that had started with an accidental collision turned into the beginning of a real friendship. Later that evening, Taehyung returned to the Jeon mansion. As she stepped inside the living room, she noticed Namjin sitting comfortably on the sofa, a book resting in his hands. He looked up the moment he heard her footsteps. "You didn't come for lunch," he said calmly. "Did you eat?" Taehyung nodded. I had it with my new friend." Namjoon lowered his book slightly. "New friend?" Taehyung nodded again. "Yes, I met her in the morning." And just like that, she began explaining her entire day. Halfway through her story, Jin walked into the living room and sat beside her on the sofa, listening with interest. Taehyung's excitement only grew. "Jimin is so friendly," she said happily. "I'm in love with her." Both Jin and Namjoon froze instantly. Taehyung's eyes widened as she realized how that sounded. "Ah, not in the way you're thinking." And then Jin and Namjoon burst into laughter. "I mean, I love her personality." Jin wiped the corner of her eye as she laughed. "You scared us for a second." The room filled with warm laughter. Days slowly passed. Little by little, Taehyung began adjusting to life in the mansion. Sometimes she would call her father, happily chatting about everything she had done throughout the day. Meanwhile, her interactions with Jungkook remained minimal. They barely spoke. Most of the time, the only words exchanged between them were simple calls for dinner, and on rare mornings, perhaps a brief greeting at breakfast. Their rooms were located upstairs, directly opposite each other, but at a distance. Sometimes, when both doors happened to be open at the same time, they could catch small glimpses of each other's rooms across the hallway. But neither of them lingered. Jungkook remained buried in his company work. Schedules, meetings, emails. He kept himself constantly busy. On the other hand, Taehyung's friendship with Jimin continued growing stronger with each passing day. Their bond deepened quickly. And every evening, Taehyung would sit comfortably in the living room with Jin and Namjoon, chatting about random things and laughing together. One morning, the peaceful atmosphere of the mansion was broken by the sound of the doorbell. Jin, standing nearby, asked one of the maids to open the door. As the door swung open, an energetic male voice burst inside. "Hey, hey! I'm back!" Immediately after, a woman's voice followed, teasing. "You should say we are back." His loud laughter echoed through the house. Upstairs, Taehyung heard the voices. She opened her door and peeked over the staircase railing. The moment she saw who had arrived, her face lit up. Without hesitation, she rushed downstairs. "Hi!" The man turned instantly, startled. His eyes widened in disbelief. Taehyung smiled brightly. "Yes, it's me." The woman beside him blinked in surprise. "Wow, Tae, it's really you." Taehyung nodded warmly. "Yes, Aunt Jisoo." Jisoo smiled fondly as she looked at her. "You've become so beautiful." Jhope shook his head in amazement. "I didn't recognize her for a moment," he laughed. "Our Tae has really grown up." Taehyung smiled shyly at the compliment, but Jhope wasn't done teasing yet. "But to me," he added playfully, "she's still the same." He raised his fingers and began measuring her height jokingly. As he did, his gaze shifted toward the staircase behind them. Jungkook was standing there, watching everything quietly. Jhope waved casually. "Hello, Cook. How are you?" Jungkook gave a small nod. "I'm fine, Uncle." Jhope grinned widely. "You should be energetic at this age," he declared proudly. "Look at me." Taehyung crossed her arms and mocked him lightly. "I heard someone was on a short trip." Jisoo chuckled softly at that. Seeing her laugh, Jin and Namjoon also joined in. Jhope waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, just for 20 days." Taehyung raised an eyebrow. "Just 20?" She tilted her head teasingly. "You're using just as a prefix now?" Jhope burst into laughter again. Taehyung suddenly remembered something. "Where is Jonah?" Jisoo answered gently. "She went abroad for her studies." Then she added curiously, "Didn't you two stay in touch?" Taehyung sighed softly. "Not in recent years." Their conversation continued warmly. Voices filled the living room with cheerful chatter. But one person remained silent. Jungkook. He stood frozen on the last stair, watching Taehyung quietly. His mind began spinning with thoughts. Is she moody? He wondered. Does her behavior show that her wedding was canceled just days ago? That her fiancé ran away? She looked carefree, relaxed, almost unaffected. Or does she think none of that even mattered at all? He frowned slightly. Looks like she has no worries about her future. Then he shook the thought away. Anyway, why should I care? 2 days later. In the quiet afternoon, a sleek car slowly pulled up in front of the Grand John mansion. The door opened, and Park Jimin stepped out gracefully. She was dressed in a luxurious outfit, sunglasses resting stylishly on her head. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring up at the massive mansion. Then she muttered to herself, "Why did Tae give me this address? Does she really live here? John Mansion? I never heard that idiot had another sister." She rolled her eyes lightly. "Okay, let's see." With confident steps, she walked straight toward the front door and pressed the bell. The door opened, and Jimin walked in casually, as if the place belonged to her. Jin, who was standing inside, froze for a moment in surprise. "Jimin? What a surprise! After such a long time. Jungkook is in his room." Jimin waved her hand dismissively. "I'm not here for that idiot." For a brief second, Jin's lips curved into a strange smile. Jimin looked around. "Where's Tae?" Jin blinked. "Wait, how do you know her?" "Oh, does that mean her new friend is you?" Jimin shrugged lightly. "Looks like it. Now where is she?" "In her room," Jin answered. Just then, Jisoo walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands with a towel. The moment Jimin saw her, her face brightened. "He and Jisoo!" Before anyone could continue the conversation, footsteps echoed from the staircase. Taehyung appeared at the top. She stopped mid-step. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw Jimin standing there, greeting everyone so casually. "Jimin, you know them?" Jimin slowly turned around, placing her hands on her hips. Then she winked. "What do you think?" At that exact moment, Jhope and Namjin walked into the living room. Jimin immediately pointed at them dramatically. "Uncle Jhope, Uncle Namjin, correct?" Then she tilted her head toward the stairs. "And that idiot must be hiding in his room." Taehyung pressed her lips together, desperately trying not to laugh. Jin narrowed her eyes playfully. In a dramatic, threatening tone, she called out, "Jimin." But before Jin could say anything else, Jimin quickly grabbed Taehyung's hand. "Tae, let's go to your room." And just like that, she began pulling Taehyung toward the stairs. Behind them, Jin shouted, "Jimin, I'm not done yet." But Jimin simply flashed a mischievous smile and disappeared upstairs with Taehyung. Taehyung looked completely confused as Jimin walked confidently ahead through the hallway. "Why do you think my room is here?" Taehyung asked. Jimin shrugged casually. "I know Aunt Jin. She usually gives one of these rooms to, Anyway, call it intuition." Taehyung blinked. Suddenly, Jimin turned and started walking in the opposite direction. Taehyung frowned. "That side isn't my room." Jimin smirked mischievously. "Oh. Who said we're going to your room?" She let out a playful laugh. "Heh." Within seconds, they stopped in front of a very familiar door. Taehyung's eyes widened slightly. Inside her mind, a thought surfaced. Why are we at Jungkook's door? He won't talk to us. Uncle and Aunt told me he never speaks to any girl since he grew up. She sighed quietly inside her head. I already know his response. Oh, just those. But Jimin had already knocked on the door confidently. From inside the room, a lazy voice responded. "Ah, coming." A moment later, the door opened. Jungkook stood there. The second he saw Jimin, his expression changed instantly. From casual to completely stunned. Jimin giggled. "Long time no see, fool." Jungkook blinked. Then he scoffed. "Fool? You're totally foolish. I'm not." He crossed his arms. "Your brain is the size of a peanut, and same goes for your height." Jimin's smile disappeared immediately. Her fists clenched as anger flashed across her face. Taehyung's eyes widened in shock. Inside her mind, disbelief echoed. He talked? Oh, wow. This is the first time I'm seeing him speak this much. And in this tone. They seem really close to each other. Another thought appeared quietly in her mind. Maybe there's a story I don't know yet. Meanwhile, somewhere else, soft yellow lights glowed around the large mirror, casting a warm halo across the quiet makeup room. The faint scent of hairspray and powder lingered in the air. In front of the mirror sat a young, strikingly handsome man, his posture relaxed, yet focused. A thick script rested in his hands. The pages were slightly crumpled, clear proof they had been flipped through many times during constant revisions. His sharp eyes moved slowly line by line, absorbing every word with careful attention. The room was silent. Then, buzz. The vibration of his phone broke the stillness. The screen lit up on the table beside him. The sudden glow caught his attention. His brows slightly furrowed as his gaze shifted toward it. He reached out calmly and picked up the phone. A single message waited on the screen. "She is in John Mansion." For a brief second, everything seemed to stop. His fingers tightened around the phone. His jaw slowly hardened. and something dark flickered behind his eyes. Just then, creak, the door slowly opened. A young girl stepped inside. She was probably part of the crew, a tablet held carefully in her hands as she walked in. But the moment her eyes landed on him, she frowned slightly, whispering to herself, "What happened to him in just a few minutes?" His mood completely changed. Her shoulders slumped in quiet disappointment. Does this mean today's shoot is canceled? She sighed softly, already imagining the chaos waiting outside if the main lead refused to film. Trying not to disturb him any further, she quietly turned around to leave. But just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Almost dangerous. Don't cancel today's shoot. He didn't even look at her. His eyes remained on the script, resting in his hand. My mood is perfectly matching today's script. The girl froze. Her eyes widened in shock. A small gasp escaped her lips. No. If you enjoyed listening, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for upcoming chapters and new stories.